For anyone with a mortgage in Australia, this year has been brutal. 3 interest rate rises, repayments up by more than $1,000 a month compared to a few years ago, and a constant, grinding question: when will it end? This week, there was a glimmer of hope. Westpac, one of the big 4 banks, brought forward its forecast for the first rate cut. Relief, it suggested, might come sooner than previously expected. But before you celebrate, you need to understand the catch, because the reason rate cuts might come sooner is not entirely good news. Today we're breaking down what the banks are actually predicting, why it might happen, and the uncomfortable truth hiding inside the good news. Let's start with where things stand. The RBA raised rates 3 times in the first half of 2026, taking the cash rate to 4.35%. Then, in June, it held steady, the first pause after those 3 hikes. The cash rate has been sitting at 4.35% since, the highest level since 2011. The big question everyone's been asking is, what next? Another hike, or the beginning of cuts? And the banks have been divided. Here's where they stand right now. NAB was the first major bank to call the peak, saying no more hikes are coming, with the first cut expected in 2027. Commonwealth Bank and ANZ are both in the hold camp. They don't expect more hikes, but they're not confidently forecasting cuts in the near term either. And Westpac has been the outlier, still forecasting possibly 1 or 2 more hikes before cuts eventually arrive. The news this week is that Westpac has brought forward its forecast for the first rate cut to August 2027, earlier than its previous forecast of early 2028. Westpac's chief economist Lucy Ellis expects inflation to ease more quickly through 2027, which would allow the RBA to start cutting sooner. It's a meaningful shift from one of the more hawkish forecasters. So that's the good news: cuts potentially coming a bit sooner. Now here's the catch, and it's important. Why would the RBA cut rates? Because the economy is slowing down, and the reason cuts might come sooner is that the economy might be weakening faster than expected. Look at the recent data. Unemployment rose to 4.5% in April, up from 4.3%. First quarter GDP growth was just 0.3%, barely growing at all. Labor productivity actually declined. Consumer spending is weak. Business confidence has fallen. These are signs of an economy losing momentum. Here's the uncomfortable truth: interest rate cuts are not a reward for good economic times. They're a response to a weakening economy. The RBA cuts rates when it's worried that growth is stalling, unemployment is rising, and the economy needs stimulus. So if rate cuts come sooner, it likely means the economy has deteriorated faster, that more people are losing jobs, that businesses are struggling, that growth has stalled. In other words, the thing that would give mortgage holders relief on their repayments is the same thing that might cost some of them their jobs. That's the catch. Lower rates would help you if you keep your income, but the economic weakness that brings those lower rates could threaten that income in the first place. There's a second catch buried in this story that affects mortgage holders directly, and it's about the gap between the RBA and your actual lender. Here's something a lot of people don't realize: your bank doesn't have to wait for the RBA to change its rates. Rate tracking by CanStar shows that even while the RBA held in June, 11 lenders including ING, BOC, and others reduced at least one variable home loan rate. Why? Competition for new borrowers. Banks are fighting for new customers by offering sharper rates. But here's the catch within the catch: those lower rates are generally being offered to new customers. If you're an existing borrower, you may not see any change unless you actively refinance or negotiate directly with your lender. CanStar's Sally Tyndall put it well: there are discounts to be had for those willing to play ball, meaning you have to actually make the phone call, or threaten to switch, to get the better rate. Loyalty doesn't get rewarded, action does. So if you've got a mortgage and you've been passively hoping for RBA relief, here's a practical tip that could save you money right now. Regardless of what the RBA does, call your lender, ask what rate they'd offer a new customer, and ask them to match it. There are apparently 40 lenders currently offering at least one owner-occupier variable rate below 6%. If you're paying more than that, it's worth a conversation. Let's also be honest about the uncertainty here. because these forecasts change constantly. The single biggest wildcard remains the Iran war and its effect on fuel prices. The inflation that drove the RBA's 3 rate rises this year was substantially caused by the fuel price shock from the Strait of Hormuz disruption. If that situation stabilizes and oil prices come down, inflation eases, and the path to rate cuts opens up. If it flares up again, fuel prices spike, inflation returns, and the RBA might even be forced to hike again rather than cut. This is why the forecasts are so divided. Westpac still saw a possible hike as its base case just weeks ago. NAB has called the peak. The next crucial data point is the June quarter inflation figures, due at the end of July. Independent economist Saul Lake said it plainly. If inflation comes in around 3 to 3.25% or lower, the case for another hike weakens significantly. If it comes in higher, another rise is back on the table. So the honest position for a mortgage holder is this: nobody knows for certain. The direction of the conversation has shifted toward cuts rather than hikes. But the timing is genuinely uncertain, and it depends heavily on factors like the Iran war that are outside anyone's control. So what should you actually do with all this? First, don't plan your finances around rate cuts arriving soon. Even the more optimistic forecasts put the first cut in 2027, and it's likely to be gradual, at 0.25 percentage points at a time. Much lower borrowing costs are not returning quickly. Plan on rates staying near current levels for at least the next 12 months, and treat any earlier cut as a bonus. Second, be proactive with your lender now. Don't wait for the RBA. Call, negotiate, or refinance. The competition among lenders means there are real savings available right now for existing borrowers who ask for them. Third, keep an eye on the broader economy, not just the rate. If cuts come because unemployment is rising and growth is stalling, that's a signal to be cautious with your own finances. Build a buffer, avoid taking on new debt, and make sure your own income is secure. The bottom line: rate relief may be coming a little sooner than we thought, but it's coming for reasons that aren't entirely comforting. And in the meantime, the best thing you can do isn't to wait for the RBA. It's to pick up the phone and negotiate with your own bank. Are you waiting for rate cuts? Have you tried negotiating with your lender? Did it work? Drop it in the comments. Practical experiences here could genuinely help other people watching. Like and subscribe for more Australian news explained simply. See you next time.